A dream family vacation turns into a harrowing ordeal when unjust assumptions lead to an unimaginable confrontation. The Johnson family, looking forward to their much-needed retreat, finds their peace shattered as resort security and police question their right to be there. Marcus Johnson, a dedicated FBI agent, is handcuffed in front of his wife, Sophia, a passionate lawyer, and their 2 children, Noah and Ella, all while his true identity remains unknown. What happens when the truth is revealed, and how will this family rise above the injustice? Subscribe to our channel to follow their journey of resilience and hope. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from. Beside him, his wife Sophia sat reclined on a cushioned lounger, her sharp, intelligent eyes softened by the rare gift of leisure. A lawyer with an unyielding passion for justice, Sophia had spent countless hours advocating for those without a voice. But today, she had traded her courtroom suits for a flowing sundress and a novel she hadn't touched in months. Their children, Noah, 12, and Ella, 7, were making the most of the resort's shimmering pool. Noah, already tall for his age, was showing off his swimming skills, challenging his younger sister to races in the shallow end. Ella's laughter filled the air as she splashed her brother in retaliation, her curly hair glinting in the sun. Marcus leaned back in his chair, sunglasses shielding his eyes from the brilliant sunlight. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to exhale and savor the moment. It wasn't just a break from his demanding job, it was a reminder of why he worked so tirelessly, to protect and provide for his family. Sophia glanced at him over the top of her book, her lips curving into a small smile. "This was a good idea," she said softly, as if breaking the spell of tranquility might chase it away. Marcus nodded. "Long overdue," he replied, his deep voice laced with warmth. The Johnsons weren't the only ones enjoying the resort, of course. Families lounged under shaded cabanas, couples sipped colorful cocktails, and resort staff buzzed about, ensuring every guest was taken care of. It was a slice of paradise, yet Marcus couldn't help but notice the subtle glances. A waiter passed by, his eyes flickering toward the Johnsons for a beat too long. At the front desk, a receptionist leaned toward a colleague, their heads close together as they exchanged whispers, their eyes darting briefly in the family's direction. Sophia noticed it too, though she chose to say nothing, her grip on her book tightening slightly. Over the years, they had both learned to pick up on these subtle shifts, the quiet reminders that even in spaces of luxury, they weren't always welcome. Marcus's eyes followed the waiter as he moved on, his FBI instincts tingling faintly. He turned his attention back to his wife, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Let's not let anything ruin this," he said softly. Sophia nodded, though the unspoken tension lingered. "We deserve this," she replied, her voice resolute. In the shallow end of the pool, Noah and Ella splashed and raced, their laughter drawing smiles from nearby guests. It was one of those moments that seemed perfect, almost too perfect. As Marcus reached for a cold drink on the table beside him, his peripheral vision caught a figure approaching. A man in a dark polo shirt and neatly pressed slacks, clearly part of the resort security team, stopped a few feet away from their loungers. His stance was rigid, his expression polite, but tinged with something unspoken. "Excuse me, sir," the guard said, his tone firm and formal. "May I ask which room you're staying in?" Marcus sat up slowly, lowering his sunglasses and meeting the guard's gaze. His voice was calm but carried a hint of curiosity. "We're in room 212. Is there a problem?" Sophia put down her book, her sharp instincts kicking in as she observed the interaction. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she stayed silent, letting Marcus handle the situation for now. "No problem, sir," the guard replied, though his body language suggested otherwise. "It's just routine. We're confirming the status of all guests in this area." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his FBI-trained instincts already sensing that this was anything but routine. "You can check with the front desk," he said evenly. The guard hesitated, his eyes flickering briefly to Sophia before returning to Marcus. "We'll need to verify that with them. In the meantime, I'll ask that you and your family remain here until we confirm." Sophia's lips tightened, her book now forgotten. "You've already asked, and we've answered," she said, her tone polite but firm. "Is there a reason you're singling us out?" The guard straightened, his professional veneer starting to crack under Sophia's piercing gaze. "Ma'am, it's not personal. It's just policy." Marcus placed a hand on Sophia's arm, a silent signal for her to stay calm. "Go ahead and check with the desk," he said, his voice steady. The guard gave a curt nod and walked off, but not before glancing over his shoulder. Sophia sighed, leaning back in her chair, but the tension between them was palpable. Minutes passed, but the sense of unease lingered. Marcus and Sophia exchanged a glance, both silently acknowledging that this routine check was anything but. When the guard returned, he wasn't alone. Another security officer accompanied him, his demeanor more forceful. The first guard addressed Marcus again, his tone colder now. "Sir, we've spoken to the front desk, but we'll need you to leave the pool area until your information can be fully verified." Sophia sat up, her frustration no longer hidden. "You've already checked. We told you our room number. What exactly are you trying to verify?" The second guard crossed his arms, his expression hard. "We've had issues with non-guests using the facilities. We're asking for your cooperation while we ensure everything checks out." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "We've cooperated. You have our room number. If you have doubts, call again. There's no reason for us to leave." Sophia stood now, her voice gaining strength. "This is harassment. You're singling out my family when we've done nothing wrong. We're guests here, just like everyone else." The second guard glanced around, noticing that nearby guests were beginning to take interest in the situation. A few had stopped their conversations to watch, while others subtly took out their phones. "Ma'am, we're just following protocol," the guard replied, though his tone was defensive now. Marcus exhaled slowly, glancing at his children. Noah and Ella were no longer playing. They stood near the edge of the pool, their joy replaced by confusion and fear. Noah, his young face marked with a mix of curiosity and concern, stepped closer to his parents. "Dad, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Marcus turned to him, his expression softening. "It's fine, son. Just a misunderstanding. Go back to the pool with your sister." But Marcus knew this was more than a misunderstanding. It was an assumption, a judgment made before any words had been exchanged. Sophia took a step toward the guards, her voice clear and unyielding. "We're not leaving. You have no grounds to treat us this way. If you're this concerned, bring the manager here." The first guard hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. The second guard, however, remained firm, his posture stiff with authority. "This doesn't need to get difficult," he said. Sophia's eyes blazed. "Difficult? You're the ones creating the problem." The atmosphere at the poolside shifted. The gentle hum of laughter and conversation had been replaced by a heavy silence. Guests whispered among themselves, their gazes darting between the guards and the Johnsons. Marcus stood now, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside him. He placed a steadying hand on Sophia's shoulder and spoke directly to the guards. "We've given you everything you need. If there's still an issue, it's on your end, not ours. We're not going anywhere." The guards exchanged a look, their authority challenged in a way they hadn't anticipated. The second guard muttered something under his breath and reached for his radio. As Marcus sat back down, he glanced at Sophia. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her anger barely contained. "They're not done," she said quietly, her voice heavy with frustration. Marcus nodded, his gaze fixed on the guards as they walked away again. "I know." The Johnsons had come here for peace, but it was clear now that their vacation had taken a turn they couldn't ignore. What should have been a day of relaxation was becoming something far more troubling, and neither Marcus nor Sophia could shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The tension at the resort's poolside had grown thick, suffocating the cheerful atmosphere that once filled the air. Conversations hushed, as uneasy guests watched the unfolding scene, their eyes darting between the Johnson family and the two security guards standing before them. Sophia Johnson, always a poised and calculated presence in the courtroom, felt her fury bubbling over. She had seen enough, and her patience was at its breaking point. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. It was about standing up for her family. Sophia stepped forward, her gaze sharp as steel. "Enough," she said, her voice slicing through the heavy silence. "You've harassed my family long enough. We've given you our room number. We've complied with your questions, and still, you treat us like criminals. What's the real reason we're being targeted?" The first guard shifted uncomfortably, his confidence waning under Sophia's unyielding glare. "Ma'am, as I said, this is just procedure." "Procedure?" Sophia interrupted, her tone laced with disbelief. "Is this the same procedure you apply to every guest here, or just the ones who look like us?" A murmur rippled through the onlooking crowd. Some guests glanced at each other, while others fixed their eyes on the guards, waiting for their response. The second guard, younger and more defensive, crossed his arms over his chest. "Ma'am, you're making this into something it's not. We're just doing our job." Sophia stepped closer, undeterred by his attempt to stand his ground. Her voice remained firm, yet there was no mistaking the fire behind her words. "Your job? Your job is to ensure the safety and comfort of all guests, not to harass and humiliate a family with no cause. My children are standing here, frightened and confused, watching their parents being treated like trespassers. So let me ask again, is this really your job?" Marcus watched Sophia with a mix of admiration and concern. Her words were powerful, and her righteous anger was undeniable. But he also felt the weight of the situation growing heavier. His eyes flickered to their children. Noah stood nearby, his brow furrowed in confusion. The confidence and trust he had always held in his parents seemed to waver as he struggled to understand why they were being treated this way. Beside him, little Ella clung to her brother's arm, her wide eyes brimming with unshed tears. Marcus knelt down, placing a comforting hand on Noah's shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "Mom and I are handling this. You don't need to worry." But Noah's voice quivered with uncertainty. "Dad, why are they being so mean to us? We didn't do anything wrong." Marcus's chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he'd had to explain the world's injustices to his children, but it never got easier. "Sometimes people make mistakes," he said softly. "But what's important is that we stand up for what's right. That's what Mom is doing right now." Sophia, meanwhile, had shifted her attention to the onlookers. She turned, addressing the crowd with the same passion that won her countless cases in the courtroom. "You're all seeing this, aren't you?" she said, her voice carrying across the poolside. "You're watching a family be treated unfairly, questioned, and humiliated without cause. If this can happen to us, it can happen to anyone." A few heads nodded, while others looked away, uncomfortable. Some of the guests with phones in their hands continued recording, and Sophia welcomed it. Turning back to the guard, she continued, "You're embarrassed now because people are watching. But let me make something clear. You've already crossed a line. You can call it procedure all you want, but we all know what this really is." The first guard looked as though he wanted to respond, but couldn't find the words. The second guard, his confidence faltering, glanced nervously at the crowd. Marcus rose to his feet, stepping beside Sophia. "She's right," he said, his voice low but firm. "You've made assumptions about us without evidence, without cause, and now you're trying to cover it up. It's not going to work." Sophia looked up at Marcus, her fiery determination mirrored in his steady composure. "They're not just disrespecting us," she said, her voice softer now but no less resolute. "They're teaching our kids that this is normal, and I refuse to let that happen." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "Neither will I." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had lost control of the situation. The younger guard muttered something under his breath and reached for his radio. "We'll call the front desk again," he said. "But until we get confirmation, I'm asking you to leave this area." Sophia's laugh was cold and sharp. "Leave? You've already disrupted our vacation, and now you want us to quietly disappear so you can avoid accountability?" She took a step forward, her voice rising. "No, we're not going anywhere. You want to escalate this? Go ahead. But I promise, when this is over, you'll regret every decision you've made here today." The crowd had grown larger, the weight of their stares now pressing heavily on the guards. The first guard finally muttered, "We'll handle this with management." "Good," Sophia snapped. "And when you do, make sure they know we'll be handling this legally." As the guards retreated, the tension lingered in the air. Sophia turned back to her family, her chest heaving with the effort of holding herself together. Marcus placed a hand on her arm. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Sophia looked at their children. Noah still seemed unsure, while Ella clung tightly to her mother's hand. Sophia knelt, gathering them both in her arms. "Listen to me," she said softly. "No one has the right to treat us like this. No one. And we're going to make sure they never do it again." Noah nodded slowly, his confusion beginning to fade in the light of his mother's strength. Ella buried her face in Sophia's shoulder, her small voice trembling. "I'm scared, Mommy." Sophia's heart broke, but she held her daughter tighter. "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have to be. We're going to be okay, I promise." As the family regrouped, the murmurs of the crowd continued around them. Sophia and Marcus exchanged a glance, their unspoken understanding clear. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Johnsons stood together, united against the storm that had begun to brew, ready to fight for the justice they deserved. The uneasy hum of tension surrounding the poolside seemed to amplify as two local police officers strode in. Their uniforms were crisp, their postures rigid with authority, and their expressions unreadable. Guests at the pool fell silent, their murmurs replaced by the quiet anticipation of what was about to unfold. Marcus Johnson stood beside his family, his shoulders squared, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside. He had seen this before. Assumptions made, authority misused, and innocence questioned. But this time it wasn't someone else. It was him. It was his family. The older officer, a tall man with a weathered face, approached first. His partner, younger and visibly more eager, followed close behind. "Sir," the older officer began, his tone firm but not aggressive. "We received a report about unauthorized use of the facilities. We need to see your identification." Marcus met the officer's gaze, his voice steady but laced with quiet authority. "I've already explained this to the resort security. My family and I are staying here, in room 212. I'm Marcus Johnson, and I'm a federal agent with the FBI." The younger officer let out a scoffing laugh, crossing his arms. "Federal agent, huh? That's a new one. Let's see some proof." Marcus reached calmly into his pocket and retrieved his badge, holding it out for the officers to inspect. "This is my FBI identification," he said evenly, "and here's my driver's license." The older officer took the badge, glancing at it briefly before handing it back. "Your ID doesn't mean anything if we can't verify it," he said, his tone hardening. "Until we can confirm your status as a guest, I'm asking you to leave the area." Sophia stepped forward, her protective instincts flaring. "This is harassment," she said sharply. "He's told you who he is, shown you his credentials, and explained our situation. What more do you need?" The younger officer smirked, his gaze flicking dismissively over Sophia. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job. If he's really who he says he is, this won't take long." Sophia's eyes blazed with fury. "Doing your job? Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass innocent families on their vacation. Do you see anyone else here being questioned, or is it just us?" The older officer's expression tightened. "Ma'am, we don't want to escalate this. We're asking for cooperation." Marcus took a deep breath, his hand brushing against Sophia's arm in a silent plea for calm. "We've cooperated. I've given you everything you need. There's no reason for this to continue." But the younger officer wasn't listening. He stepped closer to Marcus, his hand hovering near the cuffs at his belt. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Sophia gasped, her voice rising with indignation. "You can't be serious. You have no grounds to arrest him." "I'm not arresting him," the officer said coldly. "It's just for precautionary measures until we sort this out." Marcus, ever composed, raised his hand slowly. "There's no need for this," he said, his tone firm but measured. "I'm not resisting. I'm just asking you to be reasonable." But the younger officer had already made up his mind. He snapped the cuffs onto Marcus's wrists with a practiced efficiency that felt more like a display of power than necessity. Behind him, Noah and Ella stood frozen, their wide eyes fixed on their father. Noah's voice wavered as he stepped closer. "Dad? Why are they doing this?" Marcus turned his head slightly, his voice softening as he addressed his son. "It's okay, Noah. I'm fine. Stay with your mom." Ella clung to Sophia's leg, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy, why are they taking Daddy? He didn't do anything." Sophia dropped to her knees, gathering both children into her arms. Her heart ached as she looked into their frightened faces. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, her voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. "Daddy didn't do anything wrong. We'll fix this." The poolside, once filled with the sounds of laughter and relaxation, was now an arena of stunned silence. Guests watched with a mix of shock and unease, some discreetly filming the scene on their phones. Sophia stood again, her fury blazing as she turned to the officers. "Do you have any idea who you just handcuffed? My husband is an FBI agent, a man who's dedicated his life to upholding the law and protecting people like you. And this is how you treat him?" The older officer faltered, his stern demeanor cracking under the weight of her words. The younger officer, however, remained defiant. "Ma'am, if he's really FBI, this will all get sorted out. No need to get dramatic." "Dramatic?" Sophia's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. "My children just watched their father be handcuffed like a criminal. For what? Because you don't like how we look?" Marcus, still calm despite the storm around him, looked at Sophia. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let's focus on keeping the kids calm. We'll deal with this." But Sophia wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the officers, her words precise and cutting. "You're not just humiliating my husband. You're teaching my children that no matter who we are or what we've accomplished, people like you will always see us as less. That's what you're doing here." The younger officer opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the first guard from the resort stepped forward, holding a radio. "We just got confirmation," he said hurriedly. "They're guests. Room 212. The older officer's face paled, and he exchanged a glance with his partner. "Release him," he said curtly. The younger officer hesitated but complied, unlocking the cuffs with a click. Marcus rubbed his wrists, his expression unreadable as he looked at the officers. "Was that necessary?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. The older officer stammered, Apologies, sir. It was a misunderstanding." Sophia's laugh was cold, filled with disbelief. "A misunderstanding. My children will never forget what they just saw. I'll make sure no one else does either." As the officers retreated, the poolside tension lingered like a heavy fog. Marcus knelt down to Noah and Ella, gathering them into his arms. "I'm okay," he said softly, kissing the tops of their heads. "Everything's going to be okay." Sophia stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her sharp gaze following the officers as they walked away. She had never felt more resolved to fight. This wasn't just about their family anymore. It was about everyone who had ever faced this kind of injustice, and Sophia was ready to make sure it never happened again. The lobby of the luxury resort buzzed with activity as guests checked in and out, their suitcases rolling across the polished marble floors. But all motion slowed as the Johnson family entered, accompanied by 2 flustered security guards and the local police officers who had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. Eyes turned toward them, the tension rippling like a wave through the crowd. Some guests paused mid-conversation, sensing the weight of something serious unfolding. Others discreetly pulled out their phones, ready to capture what was shaping up to be a confrontation no one wanted to miss. Marcus Johnson, always composed, walked with quiet dignity, despite the humiliation of the last hour. His wrists still bore faint red marks from the handcuffs, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by the bystanders. Beside him, Sophia moved with purpose, her fierce determination radiating in every step. Noah and Ella stayed close, their young faces still etched with worry. Noah clutched his father's hand tightly, while Ella clung to her mother's side, her wide eyes darting around the room. In the center of the lobby stood the resort manager, a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit. His confident demeanor faltered as Marcus and Sophia approached. Behind him, a receptionist whispered hurriedly into a phone, her expression panicked. The deputy police chief, a late arrival to the chaos, stepped forward, his face stern but lined with discomfort. "Mr. Johnson," he began, his tone stiff. "I've been informed of the situation, and I'd like to personally apologize on behalf of the department." Marcus remained silent, his sharp gaze fixed on the officer. He didn't need to say anything. His silence spoke volumes. Sophia, however, had no intention of holding back. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the lobby like a blade. "An apology?" she said, her tone dripping with incredulity. "My husband, a decorated FBI agent, was humiliated in front of our children, handcuffed like a criminal, and dragged through this resort because your officers couldn't bother to verify his identity first. And all you have to offer is an apology." The deputy chief shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the growing crowd. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand your frustration, but we acted based on the information provided to us by resort staff. There was no ill intent." "No ill intent?" Sophia repeated, her voice rising. "Tell that to my children, who had to watch their father treated like a trespasser. Tell that to every person of color who's ever been targeted because someone decided they didn't belong." The crowd murmured in agreement, the whispers growing louder as more guests realized the gravity of what had happened. The resort manager cleared his throat, stepping forward with a strained smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, we deeply regret any misunderstanding. Rest assured, we are committed to resolving this matter swiftly and fairly." Sophia turned on him, her eyes blazing. "A misunderstanding?" she said, her voice sharp. "Your staff called the police on a paying guest, a man who showed you his room number and his federal credentials. That's not a misunderstanding. That's negligence, and it's discrimination." The manager raised his hands defensively. "We followed protocol." "No," Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but firm, silencing the manager mid-sentence. "You didn't. Your protocol involves verifying information, not making assumptions, and certainly not escalating a situation unnecessarily. My badge should have been enough." He pulled out his FBI credentials, holding them up for everyone to see. The bold letters of Federal Bureau of Investigation seemed to catch the light, drawing gasps from the onlookers. The younger officer, who had cuffed Marcus earlier, visibly paled. "Sir, we didn't realize." "You didn't bother to realize," Marcus interrupted, his tone cutting but controlled. "Instead, you made a decision based on how my family looks. That's not enforcing the law. That's enforcing bias." Sophia, seizing the moment, stepped back in. "Your actions have consequences," she said, her voice steady but powerful. "We're not just going to let this go. We'll be filing formal complaints with the police department and taking legal action against this resort. And trust me, the public will hear about this." The resort manager's face drained of color. "Please, Mrs. Johnson, there's no need to escalate." "You escalated this," Sophia snapped, "and now you'll face the repercussions." The deputy chief, sensing the gravity of the situation, raised his hands in a gesture of conciliation. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I assure you, we will launch a full investigation into what happened here. The officers involved will be held accountable." Sophia crossed her arms, her gaze unyielding. "That's a start, but understand this. An investigation isn't enough. My family deserves justice, and we will ensure it happens." The crowd, which had grown significantly larger, broke into murmurs of agreement. Some guests stepped forward to offer quiet words of support. Others recorded every moment, knowing this story would soon spread far beyond the walls of the resort. Noah tugged on Marcus's sleeve, his voice small but steady. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" Marcus knelt down, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "We'll be okay, Noah," he said softly. We're standing up for what's right. That's all that matters. Ella leaned into Sophia, her little arms wrapped tightly around her mother. Sophia kissed the top of her daughter's head, whispering, "We're strong, Ella, and no one will ever make us feel small." As the police and resort staff retreated, the Johnson family stood together in the center of the lobby, a united front against the injustice they had faced. Marcus and Sophia exchanged a glance, their shared resolve clear. This was just the beginning. They would fight, not just for their own family, but for every family that had ever been wrongfully judged, humiliated, or dismissed. And they would win. The atmosphere in the temporary suite provided by the resort was a stark contrast to the opulence of its decor. The Johnson family sat together on the plush couch in the living room, the soft glow of a table lamp casting long shadows across their tired faces. The events of the day still hung heavy in the air, each member of the family processing what had happened in their own way. Noah sat stiffly, his young face locked in a frown, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Ella leaned into Sophia, her small frame nestled against her mother's side, her curly hair damp from tears that had dried hours earlier. Marcus and Sophia exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding passing between them. Marcus cleared his throat gently, leaning forward to address the children. "Noah, Ella," he began, his voice soft but steady. "I know today was hard. I know you saw things that you didn't understand, and you probably have questions." Noah looked up, his eyes dark with confusion and anger. "Why did they do that to you, Dad?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Why did they treat us like we weren't supposed to be here?" Sophia sighed, her hand stroking Ella's back as she spoke. "Sometimes people make unfair assumptions about others based on how they look," she explained carefully. "It's called discrimination, and it's wrong. But it happens." "But why?" Noah pressed, his voice rising with frustration. "Why can't they just treat everyone the same? You're an FBI agent, Dad. You help people. Why didn't they see that?" Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he met Noah's eyes. "Because sometimes people let fear and prejudice cloud their judgment," he said. "It doesn't matter what you've accomplished or who you are. They see what they want to see, and that's why it's so important to stand up against it." Ella looked up at Sophia, her voice small and hesitant. "Will they come back, Mommy? Will they try to take Daddy away again?" Sophia's heart ached at the question, but she forced herself to smile reassuringly. "No, sweetheart. Daddy's safe, and we're here to protect each other. No one will hurt us." Ella nodded, but her grip on Sophia tightened. The fear still lingered, even if the words provided some comfort. Marcus turned his attention back to Noah, his voice firm but gentle. "Son, what happened today wasn't right, and it's not something we can ignore. We have to stand up for ourselves and for others who might go through the same thing." Noah's brow furrowed. "But how? What can we do?" Sophia leaned forward, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We fight back, Noah. Not with anger, but with action. Your dad and I are going to make sure everyone involved in this is held accountable. And we're going to make sure no other family has to experience what we did today." The family fell into a contemplative silence, the weight of Sophia's words settling over them. After a few moments, Marcus stood, walking over to a small table where his laptop rested. He opened it, his movements deliberate and purposeful. "We're going to start by documenting everything," he said, his voice steady. "The videos people took, the witnesses who were there, every detail of what happened. We're not letting any of it slip through the cracks." Sophia nodded, her resolve mirroring his. "And I'll contact the legal team tomorrow morning," she said. "This isn't just about us. It's about the bigger picture. Discrimination like this is a symptom of a much larger problem, and if we can challenge it, we can help make things better for everyone." Noah watched his parents, a flicker of admiration softening the anger in his eyes. "Do you think it'll work?" he asked. Marcus turned back to his son, his expression serious but hopeful. "I can't promise it'll be easy, and I can't promise we'll win every battle," he said. "But doing nothing guarantees nothing will change, and we're not the kind of family that stays silent in the face of wrong." Ella shifted in Sophia's lap, her voice small but clear. Will it make people be nicer to us? Sophia hugged her daughter close, her voice gentle but unwavering. We hope so, baby. That's why we're doing this. So one day, you won't have to worry about people treating you differently because of how you look. As the night wore on, the family slowly began to unwind, the tension of the day giving way to quiet resolve. Noah and Ella eventually fell asleep on the couch, their small forms curled against their parents. Marcus and Sophia sat in silence for a moment, watching their children breathe peacefully. Marcus reached for Sophia's hand, his grip firm but tender. We're doing the right thing, he said softly, more to himself than to her. Sophia turned to him, her eyes bright with determination. We are, she agreed, and we'll see it through, no matter how long it takes. In that quiet room, surrounded by the love and resilience of their family, Marcus and Sophia knew the battle ahead would be difficult. But they also knew it was worth fighting, for their children, for themselves, and for everyone who had ever faced the sting of injustice. They had faced the breaking point. Now, they were ready to rebuild and to challenge the world to be better. The large conference room buzzed with anticipation as journalists, community leaders, and supporters gathered. Cameras were poised, microphones set, and the soft hum of murmured conversations filled the air. The Johnsons stood just off to the side, taking a final moment to collect themselves. This wasn't just about their family anymore. It was about every person who had been wrongfully judged and humiliated simply because of who they were. Marcus adjusted his tie, his usually calm demeanor tinged with a hint of nervousness. Sophia reached for his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We're ready, she said softly, her voice steady. At the sound of the organizer's cue, they stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room. The murmur of the crowd quieted instantly as all eyes turned to them. Sophia approached the podium first, her confident stance and sharp gaze commanding attention. She cleared her throat, and the room fell completely silent. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice strong but filled with emotion. We're here not just to tell our story, but to shed light on a problem that affects countless families across this country: racial profiling and systemic discrimination. She glanced briefly at Marcus, who nodded in support, then back at the crowd. Last week, my husband, a decorated FBI agent, and my family were humiliated and harassed at a resort where we were paying guests. Despite presenting identification and credentials, we were treated as though we didn't belong, simply because of the way we look. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, and Sophia paused to let the weight of her words sink in. This isn't just about us, she continued. It's about every family who's been made to feel less than, every child who's seen their parents treated unfairly, and every person who's faced the indignity of being judged by their appearance rather than their character. Behind her, a large screen lit up, showing video footage taken by bystanders during the incident. The room watched in silence as the events played out, the guards questioning the family, the police arriving, and Marcus being handcuffed. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, the raw injustice of the scene laid bare. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. As an FBI agent, I've spent my career protecting this country and ensuring the safety of its citizens, he said. But last week, I was treated as a threat, not because of my actions, but because of assumptions based on my race. He looked directly at the cameras, his gaze unwavering. This isn't just my story. It's the story of too many people who've faced prejudice, who've been judged unfairly, and who've been denied their dignity. It has to stop. The Johnsons weren't alone on the stage. Witnesses from the resort had come forward, eager to support the family's fight. One by one, they shared their perspectives, their voices adding credibility and urgency to the Johnsons' cause. I was there, said a middle-aged woman who had filmed part of the incident. I saw how they treated this family, how they ignored the proof right in front of them. It wasn't right, and I knew I had to speak up. A young man who had also been at the pool added, I've seen this kind of thing happen before, but it's not every day you see someone stand up and say, no, this stops here. That's what the Johnsons are doing, and I'm proud to support them. As the testimonies continued, The Johnsons felt a sense of validation. Their voices weren't just being heard, they were being amplified by a community of people who believed in their fight. When the last witness stepped down, Sophia returned to the podium. "We're pursuing legal action against both the resort and the local police department," she announced. "Not just for our family, but to challenge the systems that allow this kind of behavior to go unchecked. We're calling for better training, accountability, and policies that ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the walls. Journalists raised their hands, eager to ask questions, but before opening the floor, Sophia took a moment to address her children, who sat in the front row, watching their parents with wide eyes. "Noah, Ella," she said, her voice softening as she looked at them. "What happened to us was wrong, but standing up for what's right, that's how we make the world better. Never forget that your voice matters." Noah straightened in his chair, his young face filled with pride. Ella smiled shyly, clutching the small stuffed animal she had brought for comfort. As the press conference came to a close, Marcus stepped forward for the final word. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Our family is strong because we stand together, and we'll keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who deserves to be treated with respect and dignity." The room erupted into applause once more as the Johnsons stepped away from the podium, their hearts full of resolve. They knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but they also knew they weren't walking it alone. Together they had turned their pain into purpose, their struggle into strength. And as they left the stage, hand in hand, they carried with them the hope of a better, fairer future, for their family and for everyone else who dared to dream of justice. The Johnson family's living room glowed with the soft light of an evening lamp. The familiar scent of Sophia's favorite lavender candle wafted through the air, bringing a sense of calm after days of turmoil. Marcus sat on the couch, leaning forward as he sifted through documents on the coffee table. Beside him, Sophia reviewed notes on her laptop, her glasses perched low on her nose as she worked with quiet determination. On the rug, Noah and Ella played a board game, their laughter bubbling up as they teased each other over the rules. For the first time in days, the house felt like a haven again, a space where they could breathe, plan, and heal. "Okay," Marcus said, breaking the silence as he set the papers aside. "We've got statements from witnesses, the footage, and support from local advocacy groups. The legal groundwork is solid." He turned to Sophia. "How's the outreach going?" Sophia glanced up, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Strong. I've been in touch with civil rights organizations. They're ready to back us up and amplify the message. This isn't just about the resort or the police. It's about addressing systemic issues." Marcus nodded, his face calm but resolute. "Good. We'll make sure this counts, not just for us but for everyone." Noah, overhearing the conversation, looked up from his game. "Are you guys still working on the case?" he asked, curiosity and pride mingling in his tone. Sophia smiled at him, setting her laptop aside. "We are, sweetheart. But it's not just work. It's about making things better for people who might go through something like this in the future." "Like us?" Ella chimed in, her wide eyes searching her mother's face. Sophia reached out and gently tucked a stray curl behind Ella's ear. "Yes, like us. But because we're standing up, we're helping to make sure other families won't have to face what we did." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "That's cool. I think you guys are brave." Marcus leaned back, his expression softening. "We're doing this together," he said. "Our family's strength comes from all of us, not just your mom and me. Standing together, that's what makes us brave." The conversation turned lighter as the family began planning the week ahead. Marcus suggested a picnic at the park, something to help them unwind and reconnect. Noah grinned, suggesting they bring the frisbee, while Ella excitedly talked about packing sandwiches and cookies. For a while, the room was filled with laughter as the family exchanged ideas, teasing one another and reveling in the simplicity of the moment. It was a reminder that amidst the challenges, their bond was unshakable, a source of joy and resilience that no external force could take away. As the evening wound down, Marcus pulled out an old family photo album, flipping through pictures of vacations, birthdays, and milestones. The kids crowded around him, pointing out their favorite memories, their laughter echoing through the room. Sophia watched them with a full heart, her gaze lingering on Marcus. "We've been through so much," she said quietly, "but moments like this make it all worth it." Marcus nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We've come out stronger, and no matter what happens next, we'll face it together." The Johnson family's journey is a powerful reminder that standing up against injustice is never easy, but it's always necessary. Through their courage and unity, they turned a moment of pain into a movement for change. Their strength didn't just challenge prejudice, it inspired others to believe in the power of resilience, love, and justice. No matter how daunting the fight may seem, remember, change starts with one voice, one action, one family refusing to back down. Together, we can build a world where fairness and equality prevail, where no one is judged by their appearance but celebrated for their humanity. What did this story inspire in you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you believe in fighting for what's right, hit the like button to show your support. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate courage, inspire change, and remind us of the power of unity. Together, we can make a difference. The Johnson strength is a testament to the fact that even in the face of adversity, hope shines brightest when we stand together. Let's keep that light alive.